It's Sunday school. Good morning, everyone. Good Sunday morning. It's almost the equinox, and we're discussing, or we're reading from, Crowley's comments on the Book of the Law. Just a brief little series of little talks here in the morning, and we've only discussed the first verse of chapter 1 and the first verse of chapter 2. And today we're going to do the first verse of chapter 3. Now, people who read the Book of the Law for the first time usually absolutely love the first chapter. They may not completely understand or know exactly what Crowley's talking about or what the Iwas is talking about, but it's very beautiful, and it's reminiscent of holy books of all kinds, of all ages, and it's beautiful. It's passionate. It's inspiring and ecstatic. And the second chapter is most everybody likes this second chapter, or at least the second chapter doesn't freak people out. But the third chapter usually makes people go, "Whoa!" Now I know why everybody was freaked out about Crowley. This is wild. This is wild stuff. And I just wanted to turn to a comment that Crowley made about the third chapter uh, in. I'll repeat this again when I read this section, but it says, I must say here that I find myself in the greatest difficulty again and again in the comprehension of this chapter. It might be said roughly that at the end of the first 5 years of silence, in other words, the first 5 years after 1904, I understood chapter 1. At the end of the second 5 years, I understood chapter 2. And then he just goes dash, 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 dash. He's still chewing on chapter 3. But it occurred to me that in one of his preparatory material or front material for, I believe, the 1938 edition of the Book of the Law, he wrote the following concerning the aeon of the new aeon. Okay, and this third chapter is the chapter of Hoor Khu or Kuit, and two different spellings. It's the difference is important, as we'll find out in a moment. So it says the new aeon. The third chapter of the book is difficult to understand and may be very repugnant to many people born before the date of the book, April 1904. It tells of the characteristics of the period on which we are now entered. Superficially, they appear appalling. We see some of them already with terrifying clarity, but fear not. It explains that certain vast stars or aggregates of experience may be described as gods. One of these is in charge of the destinies of this planet for periods of 2,000 years. And the footnote says the moment of change from one period to another is technically called the equinox of the gods. In the history of the world, as far as we know accurately, there are three such gods. Isis, the mother, when the universe was conceived as simple nourishment drawn directly from her. This period is marked by matriarchal government. Next, beginning 500 BC, Osiris, the father, when the universe was imagined as catastrophic, love, death, resurrection, as the method by which experience was built up. This corresponds to patriarchal systems. Now Horus, the child, in which we come to perceive events as continual growth, partaking in its elements of both these methods, and not to be overcome by circumstances. This present period involves the recognition of the individual as the unit of society. We realize ourselves, as explained in the first paragraph of this essay. Every event, including death, is only one more accretion to our experience, freely willed by ourselves from the beginning and therefore also predestined. This god, Horus, has a technical title, Hoor Khu, a combination of twin gods, Hoor Khu and Hoor Khu. The meaning of this doctrine must be studied in magic. And magic, he has it italicized. That's Crowley's Book 4. What is now published as Crowley's Book 4, I believe, is the magic he's referring to. He is symbolized as the hawk-headed god enthroned. He rules the present period of 2,000 years, beginning in 1904. Everywhere his government is taking root. Observe for yourself the decay of the sense of sin, the growth of innocence and irresponsibility, the strange modifications of the reproductive instinct with a tendency to become bisexual or epicene, the childlike confidence in progress, combined with the nightmare fear of catastrophe against which we are yet half willing to take precautions. Consider the outcrop of dictatorships, only possible when moral growth is in its earliest stages, and the prevalence of infantile cults like communism, fascism, pacifism, health crazes, occultism, in nearly all its forms. Religion sentimentalized to the point of practical extinction. Consider the popularity of the cinema, the wireless, the football pools, and guessing competitions, all devices for soothing fractious infants, no seed of purpose in them. Consider sport, the babyish enthusiasms and rages which it excites, whole nations disturbed by disputes between boys. Consider war, the atrocities which occur daily and leave us unmoved and hardly worried. We are children. How this new aeon of Horus will develop, how the child will grow up, these are for us to determine, growing up ourselves in the way of the law of Thelema, under the enlightened guidance of the Master Therian. Okay, we read the opening salvo for chapter 1 and chapter 2, and the opening words of chapter 3 are simply Abrahadabra, the reward of Hoor Khu. That's spelled K-U-T. Excuse me, K-H-U-T. Abrahadabra, exclamation point. The reward of Hoor Khu. Crowley's old comment says, Abrahadabra, the reward of Hoor, and then in his comment, he slips and says, Kuit. We have already seen that Abrahadabra is the glyph of the blending of the 5 and the 6, the rose and the cross. Okay, now I put up a little thing on my Facebook page today that has the word Abrahadabra on it, and it shows that there's 5 A's and 6 other types of letters. So it's 5 and 6. Now we could put those A's, those 5 A's together and form a beautiful pentagram. As a matter of fact, the pentagram is made up of 5 A's. And those 5 A's are the 5 of 5 equals 6. Now, even though that usually we see number 10 on the tree of life broken up into 4 major sections, those 4 major sections, that cross in the center is a central point. And we know that the pentagram is the key to holding together and activating those 4 elements. And the 5th element is spirit. So that's our 5. The 6 is the center 6, the 2 triads right in the middle. That's the 6. We could call that the macrocosm. As a matter of fact, especially from the consciousness of the 5, this seems as high as it gets. Even number 4 there seems like that's the demiurgos. That's where Jehovah is, the God that thinks it's God, but it isn't God because it is totally unaware that there are 3 other concepts that cause it to create. But those are the big 3 sections of the tree of life. We got the 5, microcosm, and the macrocosm, and the supernal triad. And that's where Nuit and Hadit function. Okay, but I digress. Let me go back to Crowley's comment. We've already seen that Abrahadabra is the glyph of the blending of the 5 and the 6, the rose and the cross. Okay, the cross being down there, number 10, the rose with center in number 6 up here. Okay. If you squint your eyes, you can see that it's an ankh. Okay. See also the great work, the equilibration of the 5 and the 6 is shown in this God. The fivefold as a warrior Horus, 6-fold as the solar Ra. Kuit is the name of Khem, K-H-E-M, the ram-phallus 2-plumed god Amun, so that the whole god represents in Kabbalistic symbolism the second triad. That's the second triad right there. Okay, Amun would be equivalent of the Egyptian Jupiter, and Mars right there. That's the second triad. So I'll repeat that again. So now that you can keep that in mind, fivefold is the warrior Horus, sixfold is the solar Ra. Kuit is the name of Chem, the Ramphallus two-plume god Amun, so that the whole god represents in Kabbalistic symbolism the second triad, whom all nations of men call the first, because we can't wrap our meat brains around the first triad, okay? So we call the second triad the first. Okay, but I digress. It is the red descending triangle, the whole thing visible, for Hadit and Nuit are far beyond. Note that Ra Hoor, spelled in Hebrew, Resh, Aleph, He, Vav, Vav, Resh, adds up to 418. And 418 is also the number of Abrahadabra. Now, that was the old comment. Okay? And in that old comment, he seems to ignore the obvious fact that it says Abrahadabra, the reward of Ra Hoor Khut, Khut, because in two places he refers to it as Ra Hoor Khuit. Now he's getting ahead of himself here, because it's the second verse that says, there is division hither homeward, there is a word not known, spelling is defunct, all is not aught, beware, hold, raise the spell of Ra Hoor Khuit. Okay. But he's jumping the gun here, okay, in that old comment. The new comment, he fixes that. Observe firstly the word reward. Abrahadabra, the reward of Ra Hoor Khut. Reward, which is to be compared with the words hiding and manifestation. Now, what is he referring to? He's referring to the first opening words of chapter 1 and chapter 2. Chapter 1 it said, Had, the manifestation of Nuit. Second chapter is Nu, the hiding of Hadit. So, observe firstly the word reward, which is to be compared with words hiding and manifestation in the former chapters. To reward is to guard again. This word, Abrahadabra, then, is also to be considered as a sentinel before the fortress of God. Why is the name of him spelled Khut, K-H-U-T? We have seen that S-T is the old regular honorific termination for a god. Excuse me just for a moment. Hello, Sean. I'm doing my show at the moment. That's okay. Can I call you right back in just a few minutes? I'm up to my chin in Ra Hoor Khuit.
Awesome. Will do. Thanks,
Okay.
Lon.
Bye-bye. That's my friend Sean, who is having an auction for my old writing desk that I wrote all my published works on. He's auctioning them on eBay, and I think we've only got an hour left in the auction, so didn't mean to inject that commercial into this discussion here. Okay. We've seen that ST is the regular honorific termination for a god. Ra is, as shown in the old comment, the sun. Hoor, the warrior Mars. Who is Khu? He is the magical ego of a star. Khu, he is the magical ego of a star. without the yod or the iota or the I, Khut, just spelled it with Khut, we get a human conception. The insertion of that letter makes it the transmutation into Godhead. So Khut is the human concept of that form of deity, but Khuit transmutes it into deity itself. When therefore Hoor Khu is rewarded or regarded with the magic word of the Aeon, he becomes a god. Thus in the next verse, I raise the spell of Hoor Khu. The text may also be read as follows. Abrahadabra is the magic formula of the Aeon by which men may accomplish the great work. This formula is then the reward given by the god, the largesse granted by him on his ascension to the lordship of the Aeon. Just as the INRI-EAO-LVX formula of attainment by way of crucifixion was given by Osiris when he came to power in the last Aeon. I must here say that I find myself in the greatest difficulty again and again in the comprehension of this chapter. It may be said, roughly, that at the end of the first 5 years of silence, that's AN 0 through 4, I understood chapter 1. And at the end of the second 5 years, that's AN 10 through 14, I understood chapter 2. And then there's 3 blank lines after that saying, but I don't know what the fuck to talk about this in chapter 3 here. Anyway, that is where we will end that today. Of course, I'm not going to go into the entire reading of Crowley's comments. And remember, even Crowley threw up his hands, as we saw here, about the meaning of certain passages of the Book of the Law. And so don't you feel bad if there are things that you don't understand in the Book of the Law. Perhaps it's all an arbitrary thing, because as Rabbi Lamed Ben Clifford says, if you look hard enough at anything, you'll eventually see everything. And the real magic in a holy book like the Book of the Law is that the book itself tells you that no one but you can really interpret it for yourself. And don't let anyone try to interpret it for you. Isn't that magic right then and there? Okay, Sunday school's dismissed. Go fishing. Take your shoes off. And we'll see you tomorrow. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. Bye-bye.